We're here to celebrate in some ways the life of Walter Cronkite, but this has been a sad summer in the history of CBS News. Above us, the stars seem to be going out one by one. Walter Cronkite, of course, this July, Don Hewitt in August, and Ed Bradley 3 years ago. Soldiers three who fought the same journalistic battles together, proudly and passionately. Writers have said that Walter's passing is the end of an era, a phrase so often used that there seem to be more eras than years in a century. When it comes to memory, nostalgia is often a seductive liar, but I believe Walter deserves his own era. I started my career at CBS News as a researcher in 1968, and I stayed at CBS for almost 30 years. And since I'm a naturalized American citizen born in Wales but working for a Japanese company now, I have something of a cultural identity crisis. But back in 1968, I knew who I was. I worked for the preeminent broadcast news organization in the world, and many of the best years of my life were spent with Walter and his band of journalists. There are, I think, three reasons why Walter inspired so much trust, both inside and outside CBS News. First, his personality, which included, as many have said, a wicked sense of humor, as well as a total lack of pretension. Second, his self-awareness, which allowed him to define the role of anchorman without letting it define him. And third, his leadership skill, which may be the secret to his longevity and universal respect. As for his personality, well, he clearly loved the job. His joie de vivre was infectious. He could charm his way through the Mary Tyler Moore Show without compromising one iota of his credibility. And the actors basked in his glow. They knew he was the real thing. I produced my first documentary with Walter. It was about the Rockefeller family. And the first spontaneous question Walter asked Nelson Rockefeller was, "Did you believe in Santa Claus?" The silence was deafening. Walter had gently stumped the billionaire with a kind of man-of-the-people question, and the audience waited and wondered to see if the rich were different. And they were. Sometimes Walter's genial nature could trap him. In one such incident, Walter was interviewing President Lyndon Johnson in Texas back in 1969. Walter asked the president about his decision to halt the bombing of North Vietnam and directly challenged the president's version of the timetable. As was the custom of the day, after the interview, the president left the studio and we arranged the room to shoot the reverses. The interview had not gone well. The president was evasive, with each answer lasting at least 30 minutes. At one point, the cameraman fell asleep looking through his eyepiece. The bombing question was clearly the pivotal moment in the broadcast, so the producers suggested that in the reverses, Walter asked that question more forcefully. When the president saw the final broadcast, he was furious. "That's not the way it happened," he said. "Walter is too much of a gentleman to address me that way." Under pressure, the news president changed the rules for interviews in the Book of Standards. Never again would the subject of an interview leave the room during reverses. Inadvertently, Walter's personal character resulted in a landmark change in the standards and practices for television news, all for the better. Walter was, of course, a thoroughly decent man. I remember watching his face at a luncheon at the LBJ Ranch when the president explained how communists behave. "They are," he said, "like a woman who lets you touch her leg. Pretty soon she'll let you put your hand up her skirt." Walter was completely shocked into silence and didn't know what to say and later told me he tried to find a place to hide. Walter was unquestionably the most trusted man in America. It's been said so much. It could have been a burden which would have crushed lesser men. His unusual self-awareness saved him. He once admitted to me that the anchorman's role could at times be something of a straitjacket, smothering many of his own thoughts and opinions. He knew that there was a price to pay for standing in a media spotlight that burns as much as it illuminates. I believe his wife Betsy and the whole family helped to keep Walter on an even keel. A few weeks ago, a senator remarked wistfully that Walter's years were easier. I don't think that's true at all. The Vietnam War aroused passions at that time that drove American youth into the streets in search of change, while the drive for racial equality provided an equally emotional bookend to the period that still resonates today. Walter stood in the eye of that storm, exuding a kind of preternatural calm that codified the word anchorman. He cared, but he didn't pander, and the scarcity of his emotional reactions rendered them meaningful beyond measure. The tears of sorrow after the assassination of President Kennedy, tears of joy at the moon landing, and the moment when Walter declared that the bloody experience of Vietnam is a stalemate, and President Johnson concluded, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." But I think perhaps the least understood aspect of Walter's extraordinary career was his leadership skill. Many of us grew up with the legend of the Murrow Boys. But while well-deserved, the Murrow Boys invented radio news. From 1962 to 1981, Walter guided and guarded the CBS Evening News on television. He never lost his bond with audiences, but it is equally true he never lost his bond with his colleagues at CBS News either. Aided by key producers like Sandy Sokolow, there may have been revolutionary thoughts on the street, but not in the newsroom. There were flashes of irritation and anger at the White House after a broadcast, but there was solidarity in the studio. Not enough has been said about the Cronkite boys, who handled the complexities of countless domestic and global issues, from the Vietnam War to the Cold War, from Black America to Black September, from assassinations to Watergate. The Cronkite boys stood on the bridge behind their Horatio and kept their integrity and intelligence solidly intertwined. Eric Severide, the calm commentator who matched Walter's precision with worldly wisdom. Mike Wallace, television's most admired investigative reporter, and later a stalwart of 60 Minutes. Roger Mudd, the Dean of Washington Correspondence, who conquered the complexities of Congress. Marvin Kalb, who authoritatively roamed the corridors of power in the State Department. Dan Rather, White House correspondent, who would always rather knock down doors in pursuit of a story than check to see if they were locked. Ed Bradley, the first great African-American correspondent and the last to escape Saigon at war's end. Bob Schieffer, who reminded peers that you could report with a smile and not just a sneer. Leslie Stahl, who shattered the glass ceiling with her intelligence and persistence. Morley Safer, who watched Zippo lighters in Vietnam ignite a firestorm in the Capitol. Jack Lawrence, the young rebel equally at home in urban jungles as in the jungles of Vietnam. Bob Simon, the eyes and ears of the Middle East. Bill Plant, Charles Osgood, and Charles Kuralt, who reminded us all that on the highways and byways of America, there were thousands of ordinary people still painting the tapestry of America in vivid colors. And Walter's great friend Annie Rooney, wit and raconteur, whose trusty manual typewriter still connects us to the founding years. Reporters, producers, writers, and camera crews were managed and motivated by the maestro of the newsroom, Walter Cronkite. It is perhaps the greatest epitaph that none of these men and women resented his power or challenged his commitment. They trusted him too. If history, as has been said, is the biography of heroes, then the history of broadcast journalism is surely the biography